When we see them outdoors, we notice mainly their freshness and charm, the harmony of colors and scents. But let us examine the remarkable world of plants in a somewhat different light. How much wearisome toil and hidden effort these plants have to exert before they achieve beauty, before they ripen to yield fruit. From their tenderest age, they fight a cruel battle for an inch of land, for a drop of rain, for a place in the sun. As soon as they shoot forth, they have to pass their first test of strength. They force their way from the bowels of the earth, doing battle with clods and stones, which seem like boulders against their fragility. Sometimes they have to lift an enormous weight, perhaps 50 times their own, of which they only get rid above the surface of the soil. If they overcome all these obstacles, they have a hope of going on living. Otherwise, they will die at the very beginning for lack of space and light. But plants are able to unite in this struggle for self-preservation. Their strength increases with their number. The thick pane of glass carries a weight of 1 kilogram. The weightlifters are only a few centimeters long and weigh scarcely a couple of grams. With similar force and vitality, and even greater perseverance, they make their way down into the soil. They have to take root. That is the primary condition of survival. Some plants, to be sure, make this work easier for themselves. For instance, the root of the corn plant, of which the kernels remain loose on the surface. Yes, it is easier to trail along the ground and give up trying to push roots down into the soil. But this is not a typical case. The root of a beanstalk is much more concerned with the correct direction and aims squarely for the earth's center. But if the seed is not weighted down from above, it cannot take root and may even die of thirst. It is an old experience of farmers that seeds cannot just be sown on the surface. When properly weighted down, the root slowly penetrates the earth. In turned-up soil, this is easy, apart from dodging lumps and stones. Things are much worse in places where it has to fight every inch of its way. Let us observe an interesting fact. The root grows only right behind its point. We can easily verify this if we make ink marks on it, say every millimeter. The point itself remains unchanged and is pushed by the growing part which is directly behind it. Because in nature the root grows underground, we have to demonstrate this process in the laboratory on a simple apparatus specially built for our experiment. We insert the seed of a beanstalk into the ampule. The shooting root aims into the tube. On the left is the complete ampule, on the right its individual parts. This is the tip of the root which will grow into the lower glass socket, which in turn will press on the pipe and thus bring the apparatus into motion. Another thing we must not forget, the supply of water, irrigation. Now the root can grow, press on the mobile arm, and stretch the spring, the resistance of which is indicated on the dial. At 4 atmospheres, the growth slows down. And 6.5 atmospheres of pressure is an unsurmountable obstacle. Now let us allow the root to grow in a tube without a socket. we see that it cannot go any farther and therefore winds itself into a spiral, multiplying its strength to overcome an even greater pressure. Something like this happens in nature. If we connect a rotating drum to the apparatus, the growth is automatically recorded by a graphic curve. Where does such a small rootlet get all this muscle? The answer is simple: from water. Without water, the root loses strength, stops growing, and is even shortened by the pressure of the spring. After watering, it gathers strength and resumes its growth. To ascertain the speed of growth under a constant mechanical resistance, we substitute a weight for the spring. Under a small weight, the curve goes down rapidly, indicating rapid growth. Under a weight of 200 grams, the curve shows that growth has slowed down. At 250 grams, the curve is practically horizontal. Growth is minimum. Let us again recall how important water is to a plant. A child's thimble will serve us as a flower pot for 5 small mustard plants. The amount of water here is naturally small, and the result, rapid wilting of the plants. We shall give each plant 1 drop of water. A single drop, and yet it prolongs life, perhaps for a whole day. For a certain time, plants can live even without a root, but only as long as they receive water. In a vase, the stems go down to different depths, and the flowers wilt in the same sequence as they lose contact with the water. The same unfavorable result may be produced by a sufficient quantity of water if it contains an excess of certain salt, for example, saltpeter. The plant wilts again and recovers with difficulty even when put into pure water. Let us look more closely at the water problem. The body of a plant is built of cells, each enclosed in a membrane, and it is water that makes them firm. We shall see how this is done on a common garden flower, the Tradescantia. Its hairs, growing round the stamens, form a kind of chain of cells. To make things easier to understand, we shall make a drawing of such a cell. Here it is as seen externally, and here it is in section. Outside is the cell membrane, lined by a thin layer of protoplasm. The inner cavity, called the vacuole, is filled with cellular juice. If we substitute a concentrated solution, say of saltpeter, for the water which bathes the cell, this solution will penetrate through the cell membrane and suck out the water from the vacuole. The latter gradually shrinks and ceases to tighten the cell membrane. The plant withers. If, on the contrary, we substitute fresh water for the solution, everything returns to its previous state. Now we shall understand the film sequence on which, with the help of a microscope and a motion picture camera, we recorded this process as it appears in living cells. A concentrated solution sucks the water out of the vacuole. An unfavorable condition called plasmolysis sets in. Filled with fresh water, the cells can resume their normal function. This process is called deplasmolysis. Plants are capable of enormous efforts to obtain the water they need. Thus, for example, for a dry seed to come to life, it must soak up a great deal of water, even though it may only be in contact with moisture through a small part of its surface. Then the seed swells up and is able, for instance, to split open a plaster of Paris cube with walls 2 centimeters thick. Some seeds, which we have enclosed in a very strong container, demonstrate a surprising strength if we provide them with sufficient water. Even this wooden lid, 2 centimeters thick, with an iron fastening, is not sufficient to stop the swelling. Even greater than in the limited laboratory conditions is the strength of plants in open nature. Tree roots split apart the masonry of fences. In the forest, they can cleave or lift boulders weighing many tons. Of course, their power increases at a very slow rate, over years and decades. It would hardly be possible to record it on a time-lapse film. Definitely, the wonderful world of plants is not just something nice to see and smell. It is a demonstration of an enormous effort and labor, all for one single purpose: to survive in difficult living conditions, to grow, and at the same time, to develop life-giving energy for our human world.